Welcome to another edition of Diplomatic Channel. I am Amarachi Ubani. This week, leaders and representatives from 193 countries will be gathering at the UN headquarters in New York as the 73rd General Assembly begins on the 18th. The first day of the high-level general debate will be on Tuesday, the 25th, with the theme, Making the United Nations Relevant to All People, Global Leadership and Shared Responsibilities for Peaceful, Equitable and Sustainable Societies. President Muhammadu Buhari will lead the Nigerian delegation to the UNGA. He will be addressing the General Assembly on the 25th. So what will he say and what issues will he raise? We'll be delving into possible discussions at the UNGA in a moment. The UNGA topic for the general debate could be spot on depending on where you go. There is visible UN presence in almost every country in the world. UN agencies are often one of the first responders to a crisis, to the migrant crisis on the Mediterranean, through the IOM, to peacekeeping in Somalia, parts of Central Africa and in the Middle East. But in the eyes of certain countries, the United Nations has appeared no better than a barking bulldog, equipped with the paraphernalia of office but lacking the willpower to use it. Countries such as Palestine have looked to the UN for protection as Israel continues its offensive in Gaza and both sides attack each other. They expect a reprimand for the United States, recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, knowing that it has been an ambition of Palestine to make it a capital city when the state of Palestine is given formal recognition. UN intervention in ending the civil war in Syria, hundreds of civilians are in the line of fire between government forces backed by Russia and Turkey and militants belonging to the Islamic State have been sparring off for years now, to protecting Rohingya Muslims in Myanmar and heavy sanctions on the leadership of Nobel laureate Aung San Suu Kyi as the military invaded villages, tearing down houses, killing people and causing thousands more to flee to Bangladesh. Also nearly causes a humanitarian situation there. On the other hand, the UN has been at the forefront of providing food, medicine and supplies in displaced camps in northeastern Nigeria. It continues to care for those affected by a serious cholera outbreak in Yemen and is still trying to mediate in the Syria civil war, which has gone on for nearly 7 years. Championing the vision and accomplishments of the Millennium Development Goals and now the Sustainable Development Goals, it's put its staff and personnel on the line in responding to crisis situations around the world. When leaders gather in the days ahead, will they be reviewing the achievements of the organization or will they be calling each other out for failing to protect, stand for justice? President Muhammadu Buhari will be leading the Nigerian delegation to UNGA. He will be addressing the Assembly in the afternoon of the first day of the general debate. According to the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the sessions the President will be attending will spotlight a wide range of issues such as the eradication of poverty, maintenance of international peace and security, human rights issues, highlighting humanitarian activities and even climate change. Will the President focus on world issues like he did last year, or will he highlight matters related to Nigeria? I had a chat with former Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Joe Keshi, on what should constitute the President's address and the UNGA theme for this year. Ambassador Joe Keshi, thank you for joining us on Diplomatic Channel.
Thank you for having me.
You've attended these General Assemblies before. What usually informs the topics chosen for the debate?
I think the United Nations decide what they want to focus on each particular year. But again, member states are free also. This is oftentimes in consultation with member states. And there are so many issues that are discussed during this period because the General Assembly lasts from September to December. So quite a number of issues on the table, and some are proposed by member states. For example, there's going to be a conference on tuberculosis, I think, which is being sponsored by one of the countries. So it does depend, but quite often the issue is through consultation what they want to focus in a particular year.
So are these representatives supposed to talk around the topics? Because, you know, we've always seen leaders pick talking points off of happenings in their countries and the failures of the UN at meeting them halfway with challenges.
A number of heads of states or countries see the United Nations General Assembly as a platform to reach out to the world and to use that platform not just to air their views, on issues of interest to them, but also to talk about their countries. So if you look at all the presentations made by the various heads of states, invariably they touch on issues of interest to them, and they also talk about current issues, and then go ahead and talk a lot about their countries in order to project and to sell their country to, to the rest of the world.
Does it then matter the order of appearance at the debates?
No, it doesn't really matter, but by tradition, if I recall, I think Brazil and the United Nations, and the United States. Brazil comes first, the United States second. Thereafter is based on first arrival or the first to come, because your representatives of each country goes to the United Nations and indicates when their leaders want to speak. And often, by tradition also, the president speaks first, the prime ministers, and then the foreign ministers. They more or less bring the general debate, the opening day's debate to a close.
Ambassador, let's get to the theme for the debate, making the United Nations relevant to all people, global leadership and shared responsibilities for peaceful, equitable and sustainable societies. That's a pretty wide-ranging and sort of connotes that the UN may be doing some soul-searching.
I'm not sure the United Nations is doing any soul-searching, but I think those topics are relevant given the number of issues that the world is contending with, globally. We are in a number of places we are confronted with the issues of peace. In a number of places we are contacted with the issues of, all these issues that you can think of. And so to make people understand the relevance of the United Nations and to make the United Nations relevant to the people, I think it gives the presidents and representatives of countries the opportunity to say their own contribute to the debate as to how to make the United Nations relevant to quite a number of people, or to people around the world, not just to the heads of states and those who represent them in the United Nations in New York, but to all peoples of the world. And that's exactly why the institution was set up, particularly again when you realize, as I said earlier, that all over the world there are crises, there are issues that require the attention of the United Nations.
Then has the UN continued to be relevant? Does it remain relevant in today's world?
Of course it remains relevant. That question reminds me of a popular question in our school days. I think that the question was the Congress of Vienna a reality? Of course, and to the extent that the leaders, the global leaders at that time attended the Congress of Vienna, it was a reality. Today, the United Nations remains quite, relevant to the lives of so many people around the world. If you talk to the Myanmar refugees, the Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh and elsewhere, a report has just been issued in their favor to indicate that the government in Myanmar committed genocide against that tribe. For them, the United Nations, it's relevant. If you talk to the people of, to the Palestinians, the United Nations has really made their issue global issue and is still trying to help them secure a state of their own. To them, the United Nations, it's relevant. So if you talk to quite a number of, when you look at the number of issues, global issues they are dealing with, and it's affecting the lives of people, the United Nations still remains a relevant institution. And I can imagine, imagine that this question was raised as a result of so many things happening without the UN being consulted. But again, at the end of the day, most of those issues will return to the United Nations, where representatives will sit down and address them.
There are a few areas I can think of where UN involvement can be questioned. First of all, there's a crisis in Syria. Why it's taken so long, why the UN is not actively involved in helping to stop the civil war there. There's also the issue with the Rohingya crisis, where the UN made calls to Aung San Suu Kyi, the leader, but took no action against her or her government for the deaths and displacement of Rohingya fleeing fighting in their villages. Wars are also still being fought in Africa. Now, I remember the UN Secretary General saying in one of his speeches that there are more wars and crises since the establishment of the United Nations.
Let's also realize that, true, there are more wars than since the establishment of the United Nations. But the United Nations, too, has contributed to resolving those wars. When the crisis you mentioned, you really cannot blame the United Nations 100% for the failure. Take Syria, for example, or take the Myanmar crisis. The United Nations has special representatives dealing with those issues, and the representatives go around to try to bring all the protagonists to the table. Now, if they will not listen to you, there's very little you can do. But at the end of the day, these issues return to to the Security Council, where they are also equally addressed and some decisions made. Like the refugees from Myanmar that you just mentioned, only last week or 2 weeks ago, a report was written, indicating that the government of Myanmar committed genocide as regards the refugees. And it is to the credit of the United Nations today that they might likely be tried at the International Court of Justice.
President Muhammadu Buhari is supposed to address the debate on the 25th. What should he raise in his speech?
Oh, there's so many issues the president of Nigeria can, it depends on which they consider as priority. I sincerely hope that he would talk about the ongoing, trade war, because at the end of the day, it's a war that one way or the other is going to affect a country like, like Nigeria. The Syrian war is still a topical issue, and I sincerely hope that the issue of the Palestinians will also be remembered. But above that, I think the president, I hope that the president will talk more about the country and the various efforts the government is making, for peace in our own territory. Because, look, we also have our own crisis. We have a lot of, security issues in this country. And occasionally we appeal to the world for assistance in so many ways. Now, this is an opportunity to bring that matter to the rest of the world and to tell the world how far we've gone in trying to resolve both those security issues and other, issues confronting the country. And because we are going to hold an election next year, and there are already, concerns being expressed around the world about the elections next year, I sincerely hope that the president will seize the opportunity and give the international community a reassurance that the election will be free, fair, and will be conducted without any attempt by anybody to, subject the will of the people, to be irrelevant. So there's so many things the president may just decide to, the government might like to highlight, but definitely it will be around these issues that I have named.
But he, of course, needs to declare Nigeria's position on other world issues.
Oh, certainly. He would do that. He would do that. I remember some years ago, our president actually touches on almost all the crises going around the world, particularly on African issues. I sincerely hope we do that again. And it is to our own credit to do that, because the world now becomes aware of where we stand on a number of these issues. Look, let me make the point. You see, we are not so lucky, given the fact that the superpowers, the big countries or the advanced countries dominate the media. So people don't get to hear what we do or where we stand on a number of issues. This is an opportunity for the president to use the podium, to tell the world where we stand, what we believe, and how we think that the world should be governed as a collective for peace and security and for the benefit of mankind.
Ambassador, thank you so much for speaking with us on Diplomatic Channel.
Thank you so much.
Ambassador Joe Keshi in Abuja. When we come back after the break, while relations between North Korea and the United States still depends on assurances by both sides, neighbors South Korea, China and Japan have been courting its friendship. Stay with us.